The Flag.
Hour number 3, Need to Know Morning Show. Thank you, friend, for being with us here on this beautiful Wednesday morning. Appreciate it very much. And once a month, we get the honor of having the distinguished, talented. Should I go on, Dr. Alicia? Do you kind of like how that's going on there?
I don't think my kids would use the same words to describe me.
No, they wouldn't.
But you keep going, Steve.
Yeah.
Keep it up.
You know, you're fine.
There you
just
go.
Keep right on rolling.
She is the pro when it comes to taking care of your pets, and we love her. Dr. Alicia from Prairie Winds Veterinary Center always gives us a lot to think about, good advice, and hey, pets are part of the family. You know, it's like having another kid, right, Alex?
Yeah, 2 more
Or
in my
2
case.
of them? Yes. And so Dr. Alicia is always good to share with us some of her wisdom and experience. Dr. Alicia, great to see you, as always.
It is so good to be here. Beautiful summer morning. I'm loving the sunshine.
Yes. And it feels like life is getting back to normal, doesn't it? Maybe we just needed summer to get here. I don't know.
I think that is a big part of it. We needed to see light at
Yes.
the end of the tunnel, literally.
Heat and light, yeah,
Yep.
We'll take that. Well, speaking of heat and light, we got to be aware of these things when we're traveling with our pets this summer. What are some of the things that we want to know if we're getting ready for a car trip, maybe getting the camper ready to go? Some things that we need to be mindful of.
Oh, that's such a timely topic right now because we're hearing from people that they're wanting to get out and go to the lake, go travel. And right now that's something that people really need to be mindful of. We've had a lot of people that have really been active with their pet care because they've had time, they've been home. But we've had people also that just kind of relaxed a little too much. And now all of a sudden, oh my gosh, it's summer and I don't have the dogs flea and tick and heartworm. I don't have the cats flea preventive. I need to get the shots updated because we're going to go somewhere and we need to board. So this is the time to be thinking about it before you're wanting to take the trip. What you need to do to be prepared depends upon if you're taking the dog or the cat, and if you're driving, if you're going to be boarding them, if you're going to be flying. You know, the air travel, I'm assuming, is probably going to be picking up here as we come out of our shells. And what you need for your pet depends upon the different airline requirements. So that's stuff you should do your homework on before you're going to be booking those tickets. So, you know, does your pet need a health certificate? Does your pet need to have a specific airline certificate? Some of the airlines have their own form we have to fill out within a week or 2 weeks of flying. So those are all things you want to make sure that you know. Is your pet approved for flying in the cabin, or do they need to fly in cargo? If they fly in cargo, what's the weather forecast supposed to be like? So that way you know if it's going to be safe for them to fly in cargo. First and foremost, you always want to make sure that your pets are up to date on rabies vaccination whenever you're going to be traveling, and always carry proof of that with you. And a lot of people have the tag on their dog's collar, but that's not really a legal proof of rabies vaccination because you can take that tag and you can move it from collar to
It could
collar.
be old too.
Or it could be old or expired. So you really need that rabies certificate that shows the date it was given, where it was given, who gave it, the expiration date of the vaccine, that type of thing. And technology makes that so easy. For example, our clients, we have Vet to Pet app, and you can access that through the app. So you don't even have to carry a piece of paper with you anymore, or just take a picture of it with your phone. So at least you have a digital.
Handy.
Simple.
Wow.
Simple. And you always want to have that because you never know if something could happen. Pets get lost and you have to get them out of the pound, or altercations can happen.
nip.
Yep. You could have a bite with another dog or a kid or a person, and you need that proof. If you're traveling, a lot of people aren't aware that you are supposed to be able to provide proof of rabies vaccination, especially if you're crossing state lines. And if a state trooper pulled you over and asked to see your proof of vaccination, you're supposed to be able to provide it when they ask for it.
I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah, horse people are much more familiar with travel requirements for horses because they're watched more closely. Pets are so much part of the family that we don't even give it a second thought. Of course, I'm going to take the dog, but I'm not going to take the dog's rabies certificate with. And in this kind of weather, if you're traveling with dogs and cats, make sure you have water packed so that way you can stop and give them breaks. If you're traveling with a cat, make sure you have a taxi so that way you have a way to keep them safe. These cats are really hard to catch if they get startled and dart out of the vehicle and you're in a strange place. So always have a taxi. Make sure you have leashes for your dogs. and just stop and give them breaks in pet-friendly areas.
Tell me about rabies. What is it? Is it a virus?
Yes.
What is rabies?
Rabies is a virus that is transmitted by the saliva of an infected animal that is shedding the virus at the time. And it's transmitted primarily through bites because it has to be deep enough into the skin to actually get the virus in contact with the part of the immune system that absorbs it. But you can have it transmitted as simple as having a cut on your hand, and the dog or the cat or the horse or the cow, their saliva gets on your hand, and it can be transmitted that way as well. It's almost exclusively fatal, and so that's why the vaccination is so important. A lot of people think, well, I live in an apartment in Fargo, my dog doesn't go anywhere, so it's not really that important. Or I live in a house in town, my cat doesn't ever go outside. And part of that people aren't familiar with, because we don't have a lot of rabies cases anymore compared to what there used to be 20, 30, 50 years ago. The rabies vaccine is to protect us, to protect people, because most of us are, unless you work at a vet clinic or a rescue or something like that where you are vaccinated, most of the human population is not vaccinated for rabies.
Yeah.
And so we need the pet population vaccinated to protect the people.
Sure.
Because there's been a handful of cases that have been able to survive rabies through being put into a coma while the virus runs through the nervous system. But that's rare.
Well, you don't want to mess around with that.
No, you don't want to mess around with that. That's incredibly rare, and you don't know how your nervous system is going to function should you be one of the extremely rare people that actually survive it.
Very interesting. We've heard about rabies, but I've never thought too much about what it is. So interesting stuff there. If we're traveling by car with our pet this year, I think every one of us has at one point had either a dog or a kid in the car, and you just think, okay, I got to make sure that I roll the windows down or whatever. You got to be really careful though with pets, right? They can't process heat maybe quite as well as we think they can.
Correct, is they can't sweat. The only places that they really sweat are on their paw pads. So for them, their cooling mechanism is panting, because it increases the air exchange. And then they put a lot of blood flow to their extremities, like their ears and their feet. So they overheat much more quickly, especially our short-nosed dogs, because they have such a congested airway. They overheat much more readily. And so the public service announcements always go out every summer of pay attention to your kids and your pets. Don't leave them in the car when it's hot out. Leave them home. Because even if you leave the vehicle running, I have done this with my own pet, where I have gone in and come back and the little bugger has locked the doors because he gets up on the side and trying to get out. Or I've come out and the windows are down and there he is smiling at me. So they aren't necessarily quiet when we leave them in the vehicle. And depending upon the city ordinances, some city ordinances, you're not supposed to leave your vehicle running unattended. So there's this, it's just not worth the risk of having something bad happen, because in most instances when something bad happens with hot vehicles and our pets, it's really bad.
Yeah. Is it a bad idea to let our cat or our dog just kind of roam around in the car?
For safety for travel, ideally the dogs should be either in a taxi if they're small enough to be in a taxi. Cats should be in a taxi, and big dogs should be confined to like the back seat, so that way they can't interfere with the driver, because that's a great way to have a distracted driving event to occur.
They do have seatbelts for
they
them now too. I've
and
seen
that's a great way to keep them restrained. Yep. So that way you're not having that occur during travel.
If you have a question for Dr. Alicia, you can call us right now, 701-271-1100, 271-1100. I love it when I'm driving down the street and I'll see a dog in the back seat with his head poking out the window, looking around.
Happy as a clam.
Happy as a clam. And I'm like, oh, that's nice. I talk to hey, buddy, you know. Is there any danger to that? I mean, can dogs like not get the air they need with their head out the window?
Really, it's only if there's a large, what seemed to be like a huge mastiff in the car in front of me, and he had his head and his lip was flapping.
You might not want to be in the vehicle behind him. It's dangerous.
True story. I'm all smile, see this big dog. He just lifts out and right on my windshield. Like, okay.
Driver beware. Yeah. You know that I don't mind out the window as much as pets loose in the back of a pickup box. That's dangerous.
That makes sense.
We have amputated more legs on catastrophic fractures because the dog jumped out of the back of the box at a high rate of speed, or they had to stop suddenly and the dog got thrown out of the box, or they were in an accident and the pickup rolled. That's a real danger. They don't belong in the back unless there are people that have the kennels for the back of the pickup and it's secured, but they shouldn't be loose because that's a great way to have a really catastrophic accident occur. If you're driving down the road and you're putzing along, they love it. You could have something freak happen, but honestly, that's not really as much of a risk as having them loose in a pickup box.
Yeah, makes sense. I've heard you say before you should carry a current photo of your pet when you travel. Why is that?
If they get loose, get lost, or stolen, there are so many things that can happen. Just like they tell you to make sure you have a current picture of your kid, because something can happen, and something can happen with your pet. You want to make sure that if you are going to go to a local shelter and tell them, we were here visiting, my dog got loose. If he comes in, it's so much easier if you have a picture. But honestly, nowadays, who doesn't have a picture of their pet on their phone? So at least that's not as much of an issue anymore in our digital age.
We get that going for us.
Yep.
Very good. How about if you know that your pooch is a little uppity or a little skittish or a little anxious? Is it a good idea to give them whatever the dog version of Benadryl is or something to kind of calm them down a little bit?
Oh, that's such a good question. And that's an important thing to consider, both if you're traveling in a vehicle or if you're traveling by plane. If you haven't traveled with your pet before, or if you have an older pet or you have a pet that has pre-existing conditions, especially some type of heart disease or respiratory disease, traveling can be dangerous for them because of the stress. And then if we look at using a medication, sometimes those may not be safe. And if we haven't tried those meds before, we may not know how your pet responds.
Yeah.
So it's really important to talk to your vet at least a couple weeks before you're going to fly, so we can do some trial runs of those medications. Some of them end up having the opposite effect we're looking for in some patients, where they get a little more hyperactive.
Yes.
You don't want to find that out 10,000 feet in the air, that, oh, this medication actually made my pet a little more hyper. We want to know that before you get on the plane. We want to know that before you get in the car to drive for 6, 8, 10 hours, so we can make sure that we have the right medication or the right combination and the right dose. So that way it's safe for your pet and it's a much more pleasant experience for you.
It could cause them to throw up as well. So you need to know that.
Gosh, yeah.
And what about what to feed them before you travel? I mean, because you don't want to throwing up in your car or anything either.
And that's another reason why it's important to make some trial runs with your pet. If you haven't traveled, what we always recommend to people, if we're going to use a medication, and they're worried about travel, if they've never traveled before, we want them to get in the vehicle and drive out to Castleton, drive out to Glendon, go for a little road trip and see how they behave. And then we want you to do the same thing with a medication on board. See how they respond when you're close to Fargo-Moorhead, so that way we can adjust. There are also some really, really good anti-nausea medications that we can give to our pets. And people know. They're like, my cat throws up every time I get in the vehicle.
Yeah.
We can help that. So that's another reason why you want to contact your vet before. Calling the day before and saying, I have a flight tomorrow at 10 a.m. and I need something. Well, we can probably give you something, but it makes it a lot harder to give the right thing.
Yes. Very good stuff. 821 here, Need to Know morning show. We had a email here, and I hope I'm going to read this right. Carrie sends this question in. Dr. Alicia, why don't we hear more about the titer test, TITER? There seems to be so much talk about over-vaccination and side effects and unnecessary vaccines.
Well, it depends upon the vet clinic and how familiar they are with the true use of a titer check. Titers are the antibody levels. They are not valid for certain diseases like rabies. There is no proven titer that is recognized legally or medically. They are used in young puppies to show that their immune system responded to a vaccine, but they don't necessarily imply specific protection. So that's part of the reason why some people aren't utilizing titers with our pets. And it's mainly for the distemper combination. So like distemper virus and parvovirus. In an adult dog, if they have a good titer, we know they're likely protected lifelong if their level is good at the time that the titer check is done. But that does not tell us what their antibody levels are going to be 6 months or a year or 2 years down the road. So it's a great question. And we love talking about vaccines and immune system. The nice thing is that there has been recognition of over-vaccination. The nice thing is that there are great recommendations by the American Animal Hospital Association that have been telling us for years, we do not need to give every vaccine every year to our pets. So there are a lot of vaccines that we're only giving every 3 or 4 years. And when they hit their senior years, we're maybe only giving them every 5 years or even stopping.
Yeah.
And so you may only look at giving a distemper vaccine once their puppy series is completed, maybe 3 or 4 more times in their lifetime.
Okay.
Yeah, I get the titers on my senior dog a lot. I mean, because I don't want to he's had reactions to things before, so we always do it.
So that's a great conversation to have with your vet.
If you want to have a great conversation with a great vet, Dr. Alicia from Prairie Winds would love to visit with you. 701-356-5600. You can find her online at prairiewindsvet.com. Dr. Alicia, always great to see you.
Wonderful to be here.
Thanks for coming in.
My pleasure.
Happy Wednesday to you. 823 Need to Know Morning Show, AM 1100 The Flag, WZFG. Will there be hockey this